Welcome to Sharpe Insights, Conversations with your Plan Giving Experts, a podcast for development professionals. Whether you're new to the field or looking to enhance your existing program, we will provide practical tips, expert advice, and real-world stories to deepen your understanding of plan giving. If you're committed to securing long-term support for your nonprofit, you've come to the right place.
In the world of philanthropy, wills and beneficiary designations still reign supreme, but donors are increasingly holding assets that didn't exist a generation ago. In this episode, we'll explore what gift planners need to know about digital assets and how they factor into a donor's overall estate plan. To talk about this topic, we are joined by Sharpe's technical consultant, Chris Woehrle. Chris is an adjunct professor of taxation at Widger School, Villanova University, and a nationally recognized plan-giving expert. Chris brings the combined perspective of a lawyer, educator, and experienced development professional. Chris, thanks so much for being here today.
Delighted to be here again.
Let's start with the basics. What exactly do we mean by digital assets in the context of estate planning and plan giving?
I think that's the most fundamental question that is often ignored. The way I like to think about it is two ways. The first way is there are certain things that are electronically stored information, and it's information whose value could be primarily sentimental. Then you've got other types of assets that have a core economic value. Think of some type of cryptocurrency. And maybe the very best orienting compass for everyone is to be familiar with an act I affectionately call RUFADA, R-U-F-A-D-A-A. And that stands for the Revised Uniform Fiduciary Access to Digital Asset, the Revised Uniform Fiduciary Access to Digital Assets. And right now we're in a state of enactment where over half the states in the union have, in fact, adopted it. So they define a digital asset as, quote, any electronic record of which an individual has a right or interest, and it would include, say, an online account or a file stored on your hard drive or tablet or smartphone. And it also includes other things you might expect, like your email accounts or any records that you've created to a PDF or any video. And of course, the usual social media accounts, any online purchasing accounts, even your medical records, and the list goes on. So even if all of those, quote, digital accounts don't have an economic value, they do have a value so long as someone after you're gone has access to them. So part of digital estate planning, I think, Grant, is similar to conventional estate planning. You have to have a fiduciary. A fiduciary, whether with digital assets or conventional assets, they have to determine what you own, and you have to protect them or preserve their value. And in the end, you're going to have to give an accounting to them. So in that sense, digital estate planning is very much identical. So the question coming up might be, who should be your digital fiduciary? And I think it certainly could be the same person who's your conventional fiduciary, but it doesn't have to be. Maybe you don't want your current likely executor to be the digital fiduciary because they're older and they're not at this point in their life's journey. They're not interested in learning new things, or at least this. So you have someone separate, maybe your adult son or adult granddaughter, someone who's going to be more familiar with technology. And then the other digital asset, again, think of some type of cryptocurrency, and it's getting more conventionally regulated. There's all sorts of legislation that's been proposed. So that all has to be followed carefully. So that may be a very long explanation to what at first blush seems to be a simple question. What is a digital asset?
Well, it does sound like a question that might require a longer explanation than we might expect. I'm curious, you mentioned two types of electronically stored info. One that is sentimental, right? Like photographs and that
the video
secret,
of grandpa tap dancing at 90 at your wedding or something like that.
The secret poetry manuscript that one's been working on for 20 years.
That's right.
I noticed that when I was early days of social media and online banking and all that, my passwords were like my dog's name with a one
Yeah,
behind it. And
yeah.
now it seems like every time I get prompted for a password, it says use strong password. I click on that. I don't even know what the password is. I'm just expecting for the computer to remember. Do you have any ideas or recommend any ways that people can store these passwords and keep up with them and leave them in a secure, safe place where their fiduciary or loved ones can find them?
Yeah, there's this whole idea of a digital vault. And the idea of a digital vault is you might pay a company to hold all your passwords, and they can vary. I've seen some that the fee is basically $120 a year. I've seen others that it's closer to $1,800 a year. But the value of these platforms is there's some type of multi-factor authentication, could be facial recognition or fingerprint recognition to permit someone to access the documents. There's even something that's intriguing. I call it ZKE. It's not a Greek social fraternity or sorority, but ZKE stands for zero knowledge encryption. And the idea is that not even your tech overlords, your service providers, they can't even read the documents. And some people like that level of security. And I think that having a digital wallet is important. And I've always thought about, let's say you're getting up in years, you're living in the usual retiree enclaves in, say, Florida or Louisiana, and you're subject to more extreme weather events that destroy your home, drive you out of your abode. It's rather comforting to know that all your digital assets, all your memories that you've digitized, they're still going to survive and continue. And once you get resituated, you're in good shape. I've seen people describe a digital vault as a digital file cabinet. And I think that's a helpful way to think about that. The difference is, of course, conventional file cabinet, you might have a lock on it, which you can lock or unlock as need be. And a digital vault is generally going to be locked up at all times.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, I have a friend who has half a Bitcoin that's valued at around or just over 50 grand, and it's floating out there in the internet ether, and he has no idea how to get to it, much less his family or anything to happen to him. So,
well, he's got a lot of company, and there's one gentleman, I think it's gentleman somewhere from the United Kingdom, and he somehow lost his password, and he claims that his Bitcoin is some fantabulous number with like 9 or 10 zeros. And as best as he's been able to trace things, the password which he wrote down but neglected to digitize, it's in a landfill somewhere in the United Kingdom. So close and yet so far. I mean, that's the extreme example, but I guess if I were inclined, I would have a belt and suspenders approach. Write it down somewhere, but also make sure it's been digitized. There's something about having it only in one place that would be very anxiety creating for me.
That's good advice. So let's write down all these passwords in a composition book, keep them on a shelf somewhere, let everybody know where that is, but also make sure that they're online somewhere where people can have access to it.
I also, just as an aside about password creation, I've known people who have their own little idiosyncratic rubric of how they create them. Usually it's going to be some combination of descending numbers, or it's going to be some combination of multiplying the first 3 numbers and then add that number and then add a capital letter and a lowercase letter and then the exclamation point. And as opposed to relying on the 27-digit randomized number that's been sent to you by your service provider of the digital platform.
Good call. I've yet to write one of those down. This is inspiring me to do a better job with that. Well, from a legal and a tax standpoint, how are digital assets treated differently from traditional assets in estate and gift planning?
Sure. Well, I think on one hand, I think there's a lot of similarity. You've got to inventory them. You've got to assign a value to them. Electronically stored information in and of itself may not have value, the digitized video or the digitized pictures. But to the extent you've got cryptocurrency, it's got a lot of the same advantages of conventional appreciated property. It's treated as a long-term capital asset. So if you hold the crypto asset to death, gets a step up in basis to fair market value. You always would like that as an advantage. Another way I think it's similar is there are actually markets for the monetizing or the trading into the cryptocurrency for money. So example, just like a charity will have an investment policy about how much they should be positioned in public equities, they probably have an investment policy about how much should be in crypto. And like publicly traded securities, they're going to have a policy where the crypto is monetized as soon as feasible, because you always hear of some of these spectacular crashes, or euphemistically referred to as market adjustments, where the underlying value of the crypto goes down. The other thing about part of estate planning, there are donor advised funds that have a very good expertise in liquidating or monetizing the crypto. So it doesn't have to be necessarily your charity that's doing it. Now, I think the larger the charity you are, the more inclined you could be to invest in crypto. But I think there's a great similarity. I think the negative is more, do you have a process? Like the most fundamental question is, does your gift acceptance policy provide for the acceptance of crypto? And if it does provide, do you have a process? Because remember, you're going to have to issue them a receipt. The donor's going to have to file a Form 8283, and the donor needs to get an appraisal. And while you as the charity cannot and should never do the appraisal, you should remind the donor of the crypto or the virtual currency that one is needed. So I think there's much more similarity the more you think about it than there are differences. The big difference, I think, is crypto can be very volatile.
Okay. And you touched on this, but these types of gifts are only going to increase in popularity over time. And you highly recommend that nonprofit organizations create a policy that are, to be ready for this.
Because look at it, I always believe you understand something, you have to understand your own self-interest. You don't want to be the charitable organization where one of your supporters says, I'd like to give you 100,000 in crypto or 1 million in crypto or whatever, and be in a position of turning it down because you're not ready for it, or you don't have a policy and you're not going to be able to get one up and running as fast as the potential donor wants. And he or she will want that like yesterday. So I think there's just a virtue of being ready.
Well, in preparing for the increasing popularity of these gifts, I know a lot of organizations veer away from certain types of gifts, like maybe artwork or real estate. They don't really want to become landlords or what have you. So are there any things like this or reasons why you might want to avoid digital assets, or are they all as easy and seamless as, say, leaving a bequest in a will?
Well, I don't think it's as easy as seamless as that. One, we're in a potentially new regulatory environment. You can't even get right now, I think, agreement about whether or not crypto is a security or a currency. So I guess the best way to look at it is it's just a different type of asset. I don't think it's necessarily better than conventional assets, and I'm not sure how I would quantify how much worse it is than a conventional asset. It's there. It's like you have to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. So you're not noticing any particular glaring pitfalls that you've seen in your experience to
No, because I think the market is emerging for, I think it's a maturing market. I do think, though, to the extent that the government is going to be more involved in its regulation, that sort of defeats the purpose of a lot of these currencies. Because the whole idea of a cryptocurrency, as I understand it, is to avoid being subject to some type of centralized regulatory authority.
Well, how can fundraisers bring up digital assets in conversations with donors? I think a lot of people may not even realize that they have something of potential value to give. I've heard stories of people even in the silent generation that have been pressed to maybe invest in some type of cryptocurrency and really don't even know, haven't really checked on it in a few years, and maybe don't know that the value has skyrocketed. Or
I think I would raise it in the context of first making sure that there's charitable intent. I always tell my LLM students, the course I teach in charitable gift planning, the most important question in charitable planning is the one we're not covering in this course. And that is, why do they want to give? Why do they want to give to your organization? So assuming you're in discussion with someone who has possible charitable intent, I think I'd position the virtual assets, the cryptocurrency, I'd position that as another appreciated asset and at least begin the examination of whether they have it or not.
I know you don't have a crystal ball, but looking ahead, I imagine digital assets are going to become a more mainstream part of charitable giving. Would you agree with that statement, or do you think they're going to remain more of a niche type gift, or maybe they'll take a longer time to catch on than we assume?
To me, the future is unclear, and I'll tell you why it's unclear. I think to the extent that the cryptocurrency starts assuming more regulatory requirements like conventional securities, stocks, bonds, I don't know how the crypto enthusiasts are going to react to that. I don't know how that, I'm not an economist. I'm not sure I can foresee what the value, whether that's going to decrease the value or it's going to be irrelevant. I literally don't know. But so far, it seems to be working well. So I guess I'd be cautiously optimistic that they're here to stay.
Okay. Well, this is new for everyone, and it's particularly new for me. So in preparing questions, I was worried there might have been some gaps or some things that I missed in what to anticipate. Is there anything that you can think of that we don't know that you could give some advice about?
The unknown unknowns, to paraphrase a former defense secretary, Donald Rumsfeld. I don't think I know. My only unknown that always keeps me awake would always be humans are incredibly unpredictable. And if there's any doubt in your mind, consider this fact. Most trial lawyers will tell you most lawsuits never even get to opening arguments. And most cases that actually go to trial to a jury deliberation, maybe only half of them go through to the announcement of a verdict because humans are famously unpredictable. And we know financial markets can be economically irrational. There's greed in the markets. We've had bubbles because of people entranced with the upward price of tulips, I think in 16th century Netherlands. So what is cryptocurrency like that? I don't know. But that may be a reflection of my ignorance and really failure to study it maybe as thoroughly as I should.
That's funny. I was just watching a documentary and the tulips came up and I took a little bit of pause and I've thought how far we've come since the tulips.
Yes. It's advanced civilization.
Yes.
So it is said.
Well, thanks for clarifying what we don't know. And there's probably a lot that we don't know yet. So as we learn more, I hope that we can have you back on in the future to help us further explore this somewhat complex topic of plan giving in a digital world.
I would be delighted.
Excellent. And for plan giving professionals, the key, I suppose, is understanding how these digital assets make up part of an overall estate plan and knowing how to guide donors who want to give in these new ways.
Yeah, and I think of the crypto as, a appreciated asset. It could be given outright. It could be monetized through a split interest charitable gift like a gift annuity or a remainder trust. And when in doubt, if you've got cryptocurrency and you're not equipped for it, maybe your potential supporter can facilitate through a gift to a donor advised fund and then make recommendations to benefit your charity.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris Woehrle. And thanks for being here and sharing your expertise. And I also want to thank our listeners today. If you found today's episode helpful, please subscribe and share with colleagues in the field. And as always, reach out to us if you have any questions or any topics you'd like to explore. Until next time, I'm Grant Miller. Thanks for listening. We hope today's discussion gave you practical takeaways to grow your plan giving program. To submit questions and topics for future episodes, go to sharpegroup.org or listen to us on your favorite podcast app. If you found this podcast insightful, be sure to like, review, and subscribe. Until then, stay sharp.